He burst through the diner door, gasping for air, tears streaking his face. "Please, please help," he screamed. Before we continue this story, please comment where you are watching from and click the subscribe button and notification bell in order to get more amazing stories from us. The sun rose slow over the Arizona desert, spilling liquid gold across miles of cracked highway. Heat shimmered above the asphalt, and the world seemed to hum with quiet expectation. On the side of Route 17 sat a diner that looked like it had been there forever, the Rusty Spoon. Its red neon sign buzzed faintly, half the letters burned out, but it stood like a loyal friend to the lonely and the lost. The morning rush hadn't begun yet. Inside, the smell of bacon, coffee, and diesel hung in the air. The low murmur of conversation mixed with the scrape of boots on tile. The booths were filled with regulars, truckers, drifters, and a few early travelers on their way somewhere else. Outside, parked in a tight row like soldiers, were 6 gleaming motorcycles. Chrome caught the early light, reflecting streaks of orange and gold. Beside them stood the Iron Vultures, a motorcycle club known across the Southwest. Their reputation wasn't one of kindness. People saw their tattoos, their scars, the way they carried themselves, and crossed the street without a second thought. But inside that diner, laughter rolled like thunder. It was the kind of laughter that carried a story behind it, one told through years of road miles, fights, and brotherhood. At the center of it all sat Ryder Cross, the kind of man you didn't forget. Broad shoulders, steel gray eyes, and a face that looked carved by wind and regret. His hands were rough, veins like cables running down to the heavy rings he wore. A faded scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, a reminder of a past he never talked about. He sat by the window, a steaming mug of black coffee in front of him, staring at the open road. To anyone else, it was just a stretch of cracked asphalt disappearing into desert. But to Ryder, it was freedom, danger, and peace all tangled together. "Brother, you thinking too hard again," said Benny Slick Vance, sliding into the booth across from him. Slick was younger, quicker to smile, with a snake tattoo that curled around his neck. "It's breakfast, not confession time." Ryder smirked faintly. "Just enjoying the quiet while it lasts." Slick poured sugar into his coffee, 3 heaping spoonfuls, like always. "Quiet don't last long when we're around." At another table, Tank, a wall of a man with arms the size of tree trunks, was telling a story that had everyone roaring. Someone slapped the table, nearly spilling a plate of pancakes. Even the waitress, May, a middle-aged woman with a cigarette voice and a kind heart, smiled as she poured refills. "Y'all behave yourselves," she teased. "Last time you scared off half my morning customers." Tank laughed. "We just got big voices, May. You know that." "You've got big everything," she shot back, grinning. Ryder watched it all quietly, the laughter, the easy banter. These men had done things in their lives, things that would never make it into polite conversation. But in moments like this, they were just people, flawed, rough, but still breathing, still trying. Outside, the horizon was turning brighter, and the hum of engines echoed from the highway. A couple of truckers fueled up at the gas station across the lot. The world looked peaceful. Until it wasn't. The first sound came faint and sharp, like a bird's cry carried on the wind. Then again, louder this time. A child's voice. Every head in the diner turned toward the sound. Through the dusty glass, they saw a small figure running. A child, maybe 8 years old, racing down the roadside like something out of a nightmare. His shirt was torn, his hair matted with dirt. He stumbled once, caught himself, and kept running, barefoot on the blistering pavement. He burst through the diner door, gasping for air, tears streaking his face. "Please, please help," he screamed. The room fell dead silent. Even the jukebox seemed to stop humming. Ryder was already out of his seat before anyone moved. He knelt beside the boy, steadying him with both hands. "Slow down, kid. Breathe." The boy's eyes were wild with panic. They took my sister," he stammered, voice trembling. "Please." "Men in a white van, they said they'd help us, but they took her." My mama tried to stop them. They pushed her down. She's hurt. Please, you gotta help. The words came out in broken gasps, but the terror in them was real. May covered her mouth, whispering, "Dear God." Slick was already halfway to the door. "You get a look at the van?" he asked. The boy nodded, pointing down the road. "White, no windows." They went that way. Ryder's jaw tightened. He stood in one smooth motion, tossing a few bills onto the counter. "Vultures," he said, voice low but sharp as a blade. "Saddle up." Chairs scraped. Boots pounded. Within seconds, the quiet diner erupted in sound, engines roaring to life, exhaust fumes curling into the morning air. The Iron Vultures didn't ask questions. They didn't wait for details. They moved. The boy stood in the doorway, trembling, watching as 6 motorcycles tore down the highway, dust and thunder in their wake. Inside, May knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his shaking shoulders. "It's okay, sweetheart. They're gonna help." The boy looked up at her, his small voice trembling. "You think they can catch them?" She smiled faintly through her own worry. "Honey, if anyone can, it's them." Out on the open road, Ryder's bike led the pack. The wind tore past his face, the engine growling beneath him like a living thing. His eyes scanned the horizon for any sign of a white van. He'd seen fear before, plenty of it, but not like that boy's. Not that kind. There were rules among outlaws. Some you could bend, others you couldn't. But hurting a child, that was the one thing Ryder couldn't stomach. Not ever. He gunned the throttle, heart pounding. The road stretched ahead like a challenge. Somewhere out there, a little girl was scared, crying, maybe worse, and Ryder Cross wasn't the kind of man who could sit back and do nothing. The desert blurred past. Dust kicked up in thick clouds behind them. The Iron Vultures rode like a storm, relentless, unstoppable. Behind him, Tank's voice came through the headset. "Boss, you sure about this? We don't even know who we're chasing yet." Ryder's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Don't matter," he said. "You hear a cry like that, you don't think, you move." The wind howled around them, and the sun climbed higher, burning away the last trace of morning chill. Somewhere far ahead, a white shade glinted in the distance. Ryder leaned forward on his handlebars, eyes narrowing. "Found you," he muttered. And the chase began.
The roar of engines thundered through the desert, echoing off the canyon walls like rolling drums. Dust spiraled behind the Iron Vultures as they ripped down the long stretch of highway, sunlight flashing off their chrome. The heat was rising fast, turning the air into waves of distortion. Ryder rode in front, eyes narrowed behind his sunglasses, the wind tearing through his hair. His mind was locked in on one thing, the boy's trembling voice. "They took my sister." Those words looped in his head like a battle cry. He leaned forward, throttling up, the Harley growling beneath him as if it shared his fury. Slick's voice crackled through the radio. "Got eyes on something, white van maybe half a mile ahead." Ryder's pulse kicked harder. "Copy. Don't spook him yet. Close in slow." The desert stretched endless around them. Miles of nothing but sand, scrub, and sky. But up ahead, the faint glint of white shimmered on the road like a mirage. Ryder's mind flashed back. 15 years ago, a different road, a different life. A younger version of him, angry, reckless, chasing the wrong kind of justice. That was before prison. Before everything changed. Now he wasn't chasing vengeance. He was chasing something purer. Something he didn't even have a name for anymore. Tank's deep voice broke the silence. "Boss, what if this gets ugly?" Ryder's grip tightened on the throttle. "Then we get uglier." The van ahead swerved suddenly, as if the driver had spotted them in the mirrors. It sped up, tires screaming against the asphalt. "They know we're comin'," Slick said. "Let him run," Ryder replied. "We'll make him stop." He twisted the throttle and surged forward. The wind roared in his ears, the world narrowing to the shrinking distance between him and the van. He could see movement inside, 2 shadows in the front, 1 small figure in the back window. The little girl. Ryder's heart clenched. She was there, pressed against the glass, crying. Hang on, kid, he whispered under his breath. We're comin' da. He raised a hand and motioned to Slick. The younger biker nodded, breaking formation and swinging wide to the left, while Tank veered to the right. Together they boxed the van in. Now, Ryder said. Slick pulled ahead, cutting in front of the van, forcing it to slow. The driver tried to swerve, but Tank's massive Harley came up hard on the side, scraping metal against metal. The van fishtailed, tires screeching, before careening off the road and crashing into a patch of dirt and tumbleweeds. The sound of grinding metal and shattering glass filled the air. Ryder killed his engine and was off his bike before it stopped rolling. His boots hit the dirt hard as he ran toward the van. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Tank flank left. Slick, cover me. Tank nodded and stomped through the dust, ready for anything. Ryder yanked open the back door and froze. The girl was huddled in the corner, eyes wide, clutching a torn teddy bear. Her tiny face was streaked with tears. It's okay, he said softly, kneeling down. You're safe now. A groan came from the front of the van. One of the men was still conscious, blood running down his forehead. You don't understand, he muttered, reaching for something under the seat. Ryder's instincts kicked in. In one motion, he slammed the door shut and circled around, drawing the small revolver he kept tucked in his vest. Hands where I can see 'em, he barked. The man looked up, rage and confusion mixing in his glassy eyes. You bikers got no idea who you're messin' with. Ryder kicked the door open the rest of the way, grabbed the man by the collar and yanked him out, slamming him against the van. You lay a hand on a kid again, he growled, and you'll find out exactly who you're messin' with. The man spat blood and glared, but said nothing. Tank grabbed the second man, dragging him out from the passenger side. Slick kept his gun trained while Ryder checked the van. The girl hadn't moved. Her voice was so small it barely reached him. My mama, she's hurt. Ryder crouched beside her again. Where's your mama, sweetheart? She pointed down the dirt road, toward a cluster of scrubby trees and rusted trailers barely visible through the haze. Ryder nodded once. We'll get her. He turned to Slick. Call it in. Tell May at the diner to get the sheriff on the radio. 2 men detained, child recovered. We're heading down that road. Slick nodded and pulled out his phone. Ryder lifted the girl gently into his arms. She was light, far too light. Her fingers clung to the leather of his vest, trembling. It's okay, he whispered. You're safe. What's your name? Lydia, she whispered back. That's a strong name, he said. Hold on to it. As he carried her back toward his bike, he felt something stir inside him. A mix of anger, pity, and something else. Something softer. When they reached his Harley, he sat her on the seat carefully. You stay here with Tank, all right? He's big, but he's gentle. Tank gave a reassuring nod, crouching down to her level. Ain't nobody gonna touch you, little miss. Ryder turned and started down the dirt road, his boots crunching gravel. The air smelled of heat and metal. His heartbeat thundered in his chest. He'd seen things like this before. Too many times. The world could be cruel in quiet places. Up ahead, the outlines of the trailers came into view. Faded aluminum siding, a porch half collapsed, laundry lines flapping in the dry wind. And somewhere within that silence Ryder heard it. A faint broken sob. He moved faster. Behind one of the trailers he found her. A woman, early 30s maybe, lying half-conscious against the wall. Her face was bruised, her hands scraped raw. Ryder knelt down, checking her pulse. She stirred, whispering through cracked lips. Lydia. She's safe, he said softly. We got her. Tears slipped from her eyes. They said they'd help. Said their car broke down. I tried to stop them. You don't need to explain, Ryder said gently. You're safe now. The woman's breathing hitched. Who are you? Ryder looked toward the road where his bike waited. The roar of approaching sirens was faint in the distance. Just someone who couldn't look the other way. She tried to smile, but her strength gave out. Ryder lifted her carefully in his arms, carrying her back toward the sound of engines. Tank looked up as they approached, relief washing over his face. You got her. Yeah, Ryder said quietly. We got 'em all. The little girl saw her mother and broke free from Tank's side, running as fast as her legs could move. Mama! Ryder knelt, setting the woman down just in time for Lydia to crash into her arms. The two clung to each other, sobbing, and for the first time that day Ryder allowed himself to breathe. The sound of police sirens grew louder, echoing through the valley. Slick looked over. "Cops are gonna ask a lot of questions, boss." Ryder watched the mother and daughter, their silhouettes framed against the rising sun. "Let him ask." He took a long breath, the desert wind brushing his face. There were moments in life that drew a line between who you were and who you could still become. And as the first police car appeared in the distance, Ryder Cross knew this was one of those moments. The distant wail of sirens sliced through the heavy morning air, growing louder with every passing second. Dust swirled around the trailer park, caught in the heat shimmer rising from the earth. The Iron Vultures stood like statues beside their bikes, 6 men of leather and steel, motionless but ready. Ryder Cross didn't move. He stood near the mother and daughter, watching them cling to each other in the dirt. The woman's hands trembled as she brushed the little girl's hair away from her tear-streaked face. It was a scene that looked fragile, too fragile for the harshness of the world around it. Tank wiped his brow. "Boss," he said quietly, "you think we're about to get thanked or cuffed?" Ryder smirked faintly. "With our luck? Probably both." Slick chuckled, but there was tension behind it. They all knew how this kind of thing usually went. Men with records didn't get the benefit of the doubt, not even when they were on the right side of the fight. The first police cruiser rolled to a stop in a cloud of dust. Then another. Then 2 more. Officers poured out, hands resting on their holsters, eyes scanning the scene. The van, the battered men sitting cuffed in the dirt, the bruised woman, the child, and 6 bikers standing beside their roaring Harleys. The lead car door opened slowly. Out stepped Sheriff James Dalton. The name alone carried weight in Yavapai County. He was tall, built like a man who had spent his life enforcing order in a world that didn't much care for it. The sun caught the silver in his beard and the hard lines around his eyes. For a moment no one spoke. The air was tight, like the desert was holding its breath. Ryder's eyes met his, and something flickered there, recognition. Dalton froze mid-step. His hand, resting on his belt, stilled completely. "Well," he said finally, his voice low, edged with disbelief. "I'll be damned." Ryder didn't blink. "Hello, Sheriff." Tank glanced between them, confused. "You two know each other?" Dalton gave a humorless chuckle. "Oh, we know each other. I put this man behind bars 12 years ago." The silence hit like a thunderclap. Slick muttered, "Ah, hell." The sheriff took a step forward, his boots crunching gravel. "What the hell are you doing out here, Cross? Don't tell me this is your mess." Ryder stayed calm, voice steady. "Not my mess. Just cleaned it up." Dalton's jaw tightened. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" Before Ryder could answer, the little girl Lydia stepped forward timidly, clutching her mother's hand. "He helped us," she said softly. Dalton turned toward her. His eyes softened instantly, the hardness fading. "You're safe now, sweetheart. Where's your mama?" The woman stepped forward, shaky but standing. Her lip was split, her cheek swollen. "I'm right here," she whispered. Dalton's expression changed again, shock, then confusion, then a pain that seemed to cut deep. "Carla." She blinked, her voice trembling. "James." Ryder frowned, glancing between them. The air seemed to shift. Tank leaned closer to Slick. "Wait, that's his ex-wife?" Slick nodded slowly. "Oh, this just got complicated." Dalton moved closer, disbelief written across his face. "Carla, what the hell happened to you?" She shook her head, tears spilling. "He found me. I thought I was safe out here, but he tracked me down. If they hadn't come..." She looked at Ryder, her voice breaking. "If he hadn't come, I don't know what would have happened." Dalton's gaze flicked to Ryder again. For a long, tense moment, the 2 men just stared at each other. Finally, the sheriff nodded once, slow and reluctant. "All right," he said quietly. "Looks like I owe you one." Ryder shrugged. "Don't owe me anything. Just look after your family." Dalton's eyes hardened again. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to talk about family, not after what you did." The words hit like a blow. Slick shifted uncomfortably. "Sheriff, maybe this ain't the time." Dalton held up a hand. "You think saving one kid erases a record like his?" This man burned half a town trying to get even with a gang that wronged him. 3 people ended up in the hospital, 1 didn't make it. You think I forgot that? Ryder didn't flinch. You think I forgot it? Dalton's jaw worked, but he said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy and raw. Then Carla stepped between them. Stop it. Both of you. Her voice trembled, but she stood tall. I don't care what either of you did in the past. He saved my daughter today. That's all that matters. Dalton looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. All right. All right. He turned to one of his deputies. Get those 2 idiots in the van processed. And someone call an ambulance for Miss Dalton. Carla flinched slightly at the sound of her old name. Lydia clung tighter to her hand. The deputies moved quickly, loading the restrained kidnappers into the cruisers. The tension in the air began to ease, though not completely. Dalton turned back to Ryder. You and your men, you can go. I'll put in the report that you rendered assistance. But stay out of my county after this. We clear? Ryder nodded. Clear. He turned toward his bike, ready to leave it all behind, but then Lydia's voice stopped him. Mr. Ryder? He looked back. She was holding out her teddy bear, its button eye dangling by a thread. You forgot this, she said softly. Ryder crouched down, meeting her gaze. That's yours, sweetheart. Keep it safe. She shook her head. I want you to have it. You were brave. Something broke in his chest then. A crack in the armor he'd spent years building. He took the bear gently, his rough fingers dwarfing it. Then I'll keep it safe for both of us. Lydia smiled, a small, exhausted smile. Promise. Promise. Dalton watched the exchange silently, something unreadable in his expression. When Ryder stood, their eyes met again, not as enemies this time, but as 2 men who had seen too much of the world's cruelty. Dalton gave a small nod. You did good today, Cross. Whether I like it or not. Ryder slid on his sunglasses, the faintest trace of a smile ghosting his lips. You don't have to like it, Sheriff. Just remember it. He swung a leg over his Harley, engine rumbling to life. The other vultures followed suit. As they pulled away, the dust rose behind them, glowing gold in the morning light. Carla watched them go, tears streaking her cheeks again. But this time they weren't from fear. Dalton stepped beside her, watching the bikes disappear into the distance. You sure you're all right? She nodded faintly. We're alive, James. Because of them. He nodded slowly, his eyes still on the horizon. Never thought I'd see the day I'd thank Ryder Cross. Carla looked at him. Maybe it's time you start seeing people for what they are. Not just what they were. The sheriff didn't answer. He just stood there, watching the road where the outlaws had vanished. Men the world had written off as dangerous, yet that morning had done what no one else dared. The sound of engines faded into silence, leaving only the whisper of wind through the desert. Ryder rode on without looking back, the teddy bear strapped to his handlebar, its one button eye glinting in the sun like a tiny promise kept. The road stretched endless and empty, cutting through the desert like a scar. The Iron Vultures rode in silence, their engines the only heartbeat in that barren land. Dust rose behind them in swirling ghosts, the morning sun burning red at their backs. Ryder led the pack, face unreadable behind dark shades, but his mind was far from still. The wind whipped through his hair, tugging at the weight that had settled in his chest. He could still see the little girl's eyes, wide and trusting, still hear her voice soft and pure, asking him to keep her teddy bear safe. It had been years since anyone had looked at him like that. Tank broke the silence first, pulling his bike closer. You okay, boss? Ryder didn't answer right away. The desert rolled past, a blur of dust and thornbush. I'm fine, he said finally. Yeah, Tank grunted. You always say that when you're not. Slick chimed in from behind, his voice muffled through the roar. You know Dalton ain't gonna let it go easy. The man hates you with his whole soul. Ryder's grip tightened on the handlebars. He can hate me all he wants. I'm not the same man he locked up. Yeah, well, Tank muttered. Doesn't stop the world from seeing us the same way. Once a criminal, always a criminal. Ryder's eyes narrowed on the horizon. Maybe it's time the world's wrong for once. They rode until the heat shimmered thick enough to blur the edges of the sky. When they finally rolled back into Dry Creek, their town, their quiet refuge, the diner stood waiting like an old friend. The Silver Spur Diner was nothing fancy, peeling paint, flickering neon, and coffee that could wake the dead. But it was theirs. The only place that still treated them like people instead of warnings. Marlene, the owner, was wiping the counter when they pulled in. She looked up at the rumble of engines, hands freezing mid-motion. "Lord have mercy," she muttered, stepping out onto the porch. "You boys look like you've been through hell." Tank grinned. "Nah, just took a little detour through it." She frowned. "Ryder, what happened?" He swung off the Harley, dust clinging to his boots. "Saved a woman and her kid from a couple of psychos." Marlene's eyes widened. "You serious?" "Dead serious." She stared for a long moment, then shook her head in disbelief. "And here I was thinking today'd be boring." The Vultures filed inside, the diner door creaking as they took their usual booth by the window. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, grounding them back to something almost normal. Marlene poured coffee without asking. "You boys gonna end up on the news again?" Slick smirked. "Only if the sheriff feels chatty." She shot him a look. "I'm not joking, Slick. You know half this town still thinks you're one traffic stop away from a headline." "Yeah," Tank muttered, stirring his mug. "And the other half knows it's true." The group laughed weakly, but Ryder didn't join them. His gaze drifted out the window, watching the road vanish into the desert. Marlene noticed. "You all right, honey?" He didn't look at her. "Kid gave me her teddy bear." Marlene blinked. "And that's what's got you brooding?" "She said I was brave." The words hung heavy, quieting even the loudest of them. After a long silence, Marlene sighed and leaned against the counter. "Maybe she's right." Ryder looked up at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Brave ain't what I'd call me." "Then what would you call it?" "You didn't have to stop, but you did. You didn't have to fight, but you did. Maybe you're just not used to the idea that doing good doesn't erase your past. It just means you're not chained to it anymore." Her words hit deeper than she knew. Ryder set his coffee down slowly, staring at the reflection of the diner lights in the black surface. Dalton was there. The table went silent. Tank frowned. "The Sheriff Dalton?" Ryder nodded once. Slick let out a low whistle. "Damn. Guess you two had yourselves a reunion." "Something like that," Ryder muttered. "He hasn't changed." "Neither have you," Marlene said softly. He gave a humorless laugh. "You'd be surprised." The bell over the diner door jingled suddenly, cutting the tension. Everyone turned. Two men walked in, deputies, uniforms dusty, hands resting near their holsters. The taller one, Deputy Wade, nodded politely. "Morning, folks. Sorry to interrupt breakfast." Ryder's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Wade?" The deputy shifted awkwardly. "Sheriff sent me. Said he wanted to talk." "Alone?" Slick raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's all? Usually he sends a full welcome committee." Wade gave him a thin smile. "He's trying to be civil." Ryder stood, sliding out of the booth. "He won't find me at his station." "Didn't ask you to come there," Wade said. "He's waiting outside." Marlene glanced at Ryder, worried. "Don't do anything stupid." Ryder grabbed his jacket. "Stupid was 12 years ago. I'm done with that." The diner went quiet as he stepped outside. Sheriff Dalton stood by his car, hat in hand, eyes on the road. He turned when he heard Ryder's boots on the gravel. "Didn't think you'd still be in town," he said. "Didn't plan to be." They stared at each other for a moment, the silence stretching taut. Dalton finally spoke. "I just came from the hospital. Carla's gonna be all right. Lydia too." Ryder nodded. "Good." Dalton hesitated. "She told me what you did. I don't say this lightly, Cross, thank you." Ryder raised an eyebrow. "That sound like gratitude coming from you?" Dalton almost smiled. "Don't get used to it." He slipped his hat back on. "Still, you should know, those men you took down weren't just random scum. They're connected to a bigger outfit out of Tucson. Human trafficking. We've been chasing them for months." Ryder's expression darkened. "You saying this isn't over?" "I'm saying you just kicked a hornet's nest, and they're gonna come looking for whoever did it." Ryder crossed his arms. "Let them look." Dalton studied him. "That's what worries me." For a long while neither spoke. The sun beat down, a hot, merciless glare between two men bound by history and reluctant respect. Finally Dalton said, "You could have run. You didn't. Maybe you're not the same man I arrested." Ryder's jaw tightened. "I'm not." "Then prove it. Stay clean. Don't make me regret letting you walk away today." Ryder looked him dead in the eye. "I didn't ask for forgiveness, Sheriff. I just did what was right." Dalton nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe for once so did I." He got into his car and drove off, leaving Ryder standing there in the dust, the rumble of the engine fading into silence. When Ryder turned back toward the diner, Marlene was waiting in the doorway. "What did he want?" she asked. Ryder glanced down the road where Dalton's car had disappeared. "To remind me the past doesn't forget easy." She smiled sadly. "Neither does the good you do." He didn't answer. He just looked toward the horizon, the same road where the trouble always came from, the same road that never seemed to end. The teddy bear swung gently from his handlebar outside, its button eye glinting in the sun, as if watching the man it had chosen to trust. By the next morning, Dry Creek was no longer quiet. The town that had once looked at Ryder Cross and the Iron Vultures with wary eyes now whispered his name for a different reason. The local radio crackled with news of the rescue, the bikers who stopped a kidnapping, the woman and child who made it out alive, the sheriff who shook hands with the man he once arrested. The diner was packed before noon. Truckers, ranchers, townsfolk, all talking in low voices, glancing toward the corner booth where Ryder sat nursing his coffee. He didn't like attention. Never had. The noise, the questions, the sideways stares. They were all too close to the life he'd spent years trying to escape. Tank leaned across the table. "You're famous now, brother." "Yeah," Slick added with a grin. "Local hero and all that. Think they'll let us ride in the parade next month." Ryder's mouth twitched, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Heroes don't wear patches like ours." Marlene walked by with a tray of pancakes and snorted. "Says the man who saved a little girl's life." He looked up at her. "That doesn't make me a saint." "No," she said, setting down the food. "It makes you human. That's a lot rarer." Before he could answer, the diner door opened, and everything went quiet. Sheriff Dalton stepped in, hat in hand, badge gleaming under the morning light. Every head turned, conversations freezing mid-sentence. The air thickened with tension. Ryder's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't move. Dalton walked straight toward him. For a heartbeat it felt like 12 years ago all over again. The day Dalton dragged him out of that warehouse in handcuffs, blood on his knuckles and regret in his eyes. But this time Dalton stopped a few feet away and nodded. "Mind if I sit?" Ryder gestured at the booth. "It's a free country." The sheriff slid in opposite him. The rest of the diner held its breath. Tank whispered, "Well, this should be good," and quietly motioned for the other bikers to give them space. Dalton set his hat on the table, fingers tracing the brim. "Didn't come here to fight, Cross. Could have fooled me." Dalton ignored the jab. "I came to say thank you. Properly this time." Ryder tilted his head, studying him. "You already did that yesterday." "Not like this." Dalton sighed. "When I locked you up, you just come off a bad run. You were angry, reckless, out for blood. I thought that was all you'd ever be." Ryder stared at the table, his reflection warped in the coffee's dark surface. "You weren't wrong. Maybe not then," Dalton said quietly. "But yesterday proved you're not that man anymore." Ryder gave a humorless laugh. "Funny how one good deed can make people forget 100 bad ones." Dalton leaned forward, eyes steady. "I didn't forget. I forgave. There's a difference." That caught Ryder off guard. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally, Dalton reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "My daughter wanted you to have this." Ryder hesitated, then took it. Inside was a crayon drawing. 3 motorcycles, a little girl with braids, and a man with a red vest kneeling beside her. Above it, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Thank you, Mr. Ryder." Something tightened in his chest. He didn't say anything, but his fingers lingered on the paper. Dalton noticed. "Lydia doesn't usually draw strangers. Guess you made an impression." Ryder swallowed hard. "She's a good kid." "She's my world," Dalton said softly. And yesterday you gave her back to me. I won't forget that. For the first time in a long while, Ryder looked the sheriff in the eyes and saw no judgment there. Only gratitude and something that looked almost like respect. He nodded slowly. You're welcome. Dalton stood, slipping his hat back on. You ever need anything, you come find me. Doors open. The sheriff left without another word. And the diner buzzed with hushed murmurs as the door swung shut. Tank slid back into the booth, wide-eyed. Did I just see Sheriff Dalton thank you? Slick whistled. Hell's freezing over. Ryder folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into his vest pocket. Don't make a big deal of it. Marlene smiled from behind the counter. Too late for that, sugar. Whole town's talking. Even the church ladies are saying prayers for you. Ryder groaned. That's worse than the cops. But despite the teasing, something in him felt lighter. The weight he'd carried for so long, the guilt, the resentment, the feeling that he could never outrun what he'd done, seemed to lift, if only a little. Later that afternoon, Ryder sat outside the diner alone, boots propped on the railing, the desert stretching endlessly ahead. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter from inside. Tank telling some story, Marlene pretending not to smile. He pulled out Lydia's drawing again, staring at it under the sunlight. For years he'd lived by one rule. Don't get attached. It made life simple. Easier to write off, easier to forget. But now, looking at that piece of paper, he felt something shift. Something he hadn't felt since before prison. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was danger. Maybe it was both. As he sat there, the sound of tires crunching over gravel broke the quiet. A black sedan pulled up, dust billowing behind it. The door opened and a woman stepped out, Carla. Her bruises were fading now, her strength returning. She carried a small paper bag in one hand. Brought you something, she said. Ryder blinked. You didn't have to. She shrugged. You didn't have to save us. She handed him the bag. Inside was a slice of pie from the hospital cafeteria. Apple a little crushed but clearly meant with care. I heard what you said to the sheriff, she said quietly. About not being a saint. You're wrong, you know. Ryder raised an eyebrow. That's so. She nodded. Saints don't have to be perfect. They just have to show up when it matters. You did. He didn't know what to say to that. She smiled faintly. Lydia still talks about you, you know. Says she wants to learn to ride a motorcycle one day. Ryder smirked. Tell her to start with a bicycle. Carla laughed softly. She's stubborn. Must have gotten it from you. He looked at her, then really looked. There was still pain in her eyes, but there was also something else, peace maybe, or gratitude. Take care of her, he said quietly. I will. She hesitated, then added, and you take care of yourself, Ryder Cross. The world might need you again someday. With that, she turned and walked back to her car, the wind catching her hair as she drove away into the horizon. Ryder watched until she was gone, the paper bag still warm in his hands. For the first time in years he realized he wasn't running anymore. He was standing still, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. That night, Dry Creek slept under a full moon. The streets were quiet, save for the flickering of the neon diner sign and the low hum of cicadas. But inside the Silver Spur, the Iron Vultures were restless. Tank sat by the window, polishing a wrench with methodical focus. Slick flipped through an old newspaper, its pages yellow and curling. Ryder leaned against the counter, cigarette burning slow between his fingers, eyes on the road beyond the glass. Feels too calm, Tank muttered. Slick nodded. Yeah, like that silence right before something bad happens. Ryder didn't answer. He felt it too, the tension humming in the air, faint but sharp, like the taste of rain before a storm. He'd been through enough fights to recognize when trouble was circling back. The front door creaked open. A tall man in a weathered coat stepped in, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. He wasn't local, too polished, too quiet. Marlene froze mid-pour at the counter. Evenin', she said cautiously. The stranger smiled thinly. Evenin'. He scanned the room slowly before his gaze landed on Ryder. You must be Cross. Ryder exhaled smoke through his nose. Who's asking? The man stepped closer. Name's Burke. I work for people who don't like their business interrupted. Tank straightened in his seat. You lost, buddy? Burke ignored him. pulling up a chair across from Ryder. You and your friends stuck your noses into something last week. Took out 3 of my employer's men. Your employer? Ryder repeated flatly. You mean the ones kidnapping women? Burke's smile didn't falter. Let's not dress it up with words like that. They were making money. You cost them a lot of it. Ryder flicked ash into the tray. Then tell your boss to find a new line of work. Burke's voice lowered, calm but dangerous. He's not the forgiving type. He'll come for you and anyone standing near you. But I'm here with an offer. Tank bristled. An offer? You got some nerve. Burke's gaze flicked to him. You want to stay alive, don't you? Walk away. Leave town tonight. Forget all about Carla and her kid. You do that and this ends. Ryder stubbed out his cigarette, eyes cold. And if I don't? Burke leaned in, voice turning almost gentle. Then next time it's not a warning. It's a funeral. The air went razor sharp. Slick shifted, hand sliding under the table toward the holster at his hip. Tank's fingers flexed around the wrench. Ryder didn't move. His stare never wavered. Tell your boss if he wants to find me, I don't run. I ride. Burke studied him for a moment, then chuckled quietly. Stubborn man. Guess prison didn't break you after all. Guess not. The stranger rose slowly, dusted off his coat, and turned to leave. Before stepping outside, he paused. You've got until sunrise. The bell above the door jingled as he disappeared into the night. For a long while no one spoke. Finally Marlene broke the silence. What the hell was that? Trouble, Tank said simply. Slick looked at Ryder. You really gonna wait around for these guys to show up? Ryder's jaw tightened. I'm done running. They want a fight, they'll find one. Marlene slammed her dish towel on the counter. Ryder Cross, don't you dare bring that fight here. I just replaced the damn windows last time. Ryder's expression softened slightly. I'll take it outside, Marlene. Promise. She glared at him but said nothing more. The bikers spent the rest of the night preparing. They moved their bikes behind the diner, checked weapons, and took turns watching the road. The moon dipped low, painting the desert silver and ghostly. By dawn the horizon bled orange and red, like a wound. The hum of engines rolled in from the distance. Tank's hand went to his gun. They're coming. Ryder stepped out into the open, leather jacket gleaming in the half-light. 3 black SUVs appeared down the road, dust billowing behind them. Slick whistled. Looks like they brought friends. The vehicles screeched to a stop just short of the diner. Doors opened. Men stepped out. 6 of them, armed, faces hard and cold. Burke wasn't among them. Ryder called out. You boys get lost? One of the men grinned. Nope. Just here to finish what your buddy started. Tank muttered. Guess they didn't take your offer. The fight exploded like a match to gasoline. Gunfire cracked through the dawn. The sound echoed across the empty desert. Bullets tore through the wooden posts. Glass shattered. Marlene screamed from inside the diner. Ryder dove behind his bike, returning fire. Tank flanked left, taking cover behind the old gas pump. Slick rolled under a window, firing 2 clean shots that dropped a man to the dirt. The air filled with smoke, dust, and the metallic scent of adrenaline. Ryder moved fast, years of instinct kicking in. He spotted one man reloading near the SUV and sprinted forward, slamming him against the door before disarming him with a single twist. The man went down hard, groaning. The last of the attackers tried to run, but Tank stepped out from behind the diner, shotgun leveled. Bad idea. The man froze, hands raised. And then sirens. Loud, rising, cutting through the chaos like thunder. Sheriff Dalton's cruisers came barreling down the road, lights flashing. The remaining gunmen dropped their weapons. Within minutes, the fight was over. Dalton stormed out of his car, gun drawn. What the hell happened here? Ryder stood amid the wreckage, dust coating his jacket, blood on his knuckles. They came looking for payback. Dalton's eyes swept the scene, taking in the bodies, the bullet holes, the black SUVs. You're telling me this was over that kidnapping? Looks like it. Dalton holstered his weapon, jaw tightening. You just declared war, Cross. These men aren't small time. They'll send more. Ryder met his gaze. Then I'll be ready. Dalton stepped closer, his voice low. You can't fight a cartel by yourself. I should haul you in right now for obstruction. Ryder smirked. You could try. For a second it felt like old times again, the same rivalry, the same unspoken respect. Then Dalton sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're a damn fool." "Maybe," Ryder said, glancing toward the rising sun. "But I'm not the kind that turns away when someone needs help." Dalton looked at him long and hard before finally saying, "You just made this my problem too." Ryder nodded once. "Guess we're on the same side now." The sheriff didn't reply. But when he turned to bark orders to his deputies, Ryder saw it. The faintest trace of a grin, half resigned, half proud. The Iron Vultures stood behind him, battered but unbroken, smoke curling from the barrels of their guns. The desert wind blew through the shattered diner windows, carrying the faint smell of coffee and gunpowder. And for the first time in a long while, Ryder Cross realized something simple and terrifying. Doing the right thing doesn't end your past. It just gives it something new to fight for. By morning the smell of gunpowder had faded, but its echo lingered in every corner of Dry Creek. Reporters from the next county were already circling like vultures, snapping photos of the bullet-riddled diner and whispering about the ex-con biker who started a war. The sheriff's deputies were still cleaning up the mess, marking shells, taping off the road, but the real damage couldn't be measured in evidence. It was written on people's faces. Inside the Silver Spur, Marlene sat behind the counter, staring blankly at the broken glass scattered across her floor. Her coffee pot lay shattered, and the morning crowd had vanished. Ryder stood at the doorway, shoulders heavy, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. She didn't look up when she said, "You know, when I opened this place, I wanted it to be a safe stop for anyone just passing through. Not a war zone." "I'll fix it," Ryder said quietly. Marlene snorted. "You gonna fix the windows or the nightmares?" He didn't answer. After a long moment she sighed. "I know you didn't start this, but whatever this is, whatever you're fighting, it's bigger than this town. And it's gonna bury it if you're not careful." Ryder met her gaze finally. "Then I'll take it out of town." Her expression softened, but her voice didn't. "You can't keep doing this, Ryder. Running into every fire like you got something to prove." He looked away, jaw tightening. "Maybe I do." Marlene stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Is this about what happened before? The thing you never talk about?" For a second he froze. Then he said quietly, "Doesn't matter anymore. Maybe it's the only thing that does." Before Ryder could respond, the bell above the door jingled. Sheriff Dalton stepped in, his uniform dusty, his face drawn. Behind him, two deputies carried evidence bags toward their truck. Dalton looked straight at Ryder. "We need to talk." Ryder followed him outside, into the pale morning light. The road was still stained with tire marks, and a burned-out SUV smoked faintly in the distance. "You got lucky last night," Dalton said, hands on his hips. "If we'd been 10 minutes later, we'd be scraping you off the asphalt. Guess timing's everything." Dalton shot him a sharp look. "Don't play smart, Ryder. You're in deep. Those men weren't freelancers, they were part of something called the Tedesco Ring. They run guns, people, anything that makes money. The ones you took out were small fry." Ryder's brow furrowed. "So who's the big fish?" Dalton hesitated, glancing toward the highway. "You ever hear of Vincent Tedesco?" Ryder stiffened. The name hit like a bullet. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I knew him. Years ago." Dalton frowned. "Knew him how?" Ryder exhaled. "He was my cellmate." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me the guy who's gunning for you now used to share a cell with you?" Ryder nodded once. "Back in Florence Correctional. He was small time then, just muscle for hire. Guess he found a bigger ladder to climb." Dalton rubbed his temples. "This just keeps getting better. I didn't know he was still alive." "Well, he is," Dalton said grimly. "And he's got reason to come after you. Word is, he blames you for a job that went south years ago." Ryder's voice hardened. "That job went south because he killed 2 men and pinned it on me. That's why I went away." Dalton's jaw tightened. "So this is personal." Ryder's eyes were distant now, somewhere far behind the horizon. "Yeah, it's personal." Dalton sighed. "Then you've got a choice to make. You can leave town before he sends more of his dogs, or stay and make every innocent soul here a target." Ryder didn't answer. He just stared at the wreckage, the desert wind tugging at his jacket. "I'm not leaving." he said finally. I've been running half my life. It ends here. Dalton stared at him for a long moment. Then reluctantly he said, Then you'd better saddle up. Because if Tedesco's coming, he won't come quiet. He turned and walked away, leaving Ryder alone on the dusty roadside. For a long time Ryder stood there silent. The sun rose higher, burning the mist off the highway. He could almost hear Vincent's voice in his head. Smooth, mocking, the way it used to be in the cell block. You always thought you were the hero, didn't you, Cross? He clenched his fists, forcing the memory down. Not this time. Later that day, he found himself outside Carla's trailer. The door was open and little Eli sat on the porch steps, playing with a toy truck. His laughter cut through the tension like sunlight through fog. Carla appeared at the doorway, a bruise still faint on her arm but her smile soft. You shouldn't be here. Sheriff says it's not safe. Ryder leaned on the railing. Nowhere's safe if we let them win. She studied him quietly. You really think you can take on men like that? I've taken on worse. Carla hesitated, then said, When I was hiding in that motel room I kept thinking no one would come, that no one cared. But you did. Ryder shook his head. I didn't do it for thanks. I know, she said softly. That's what makes it matter. Eli looked up from his toy. Mr. Ryder, are the bad guys gone? Ryder knelt down, meeting his eyes. Not yet. But they will be. The boy nodded solemnly, as if making a pact. Carla's voice wavered. Please don't get yourself killed for us. Ryder stood, his expression unreadable. I've already died once, Carla. The man who came back just hasn't figured out what to do with the second chance. She stared at him, and for a heartbeat he almost smiled, something fragile, fleeting, human. Then he turned, heading back toward the highway. That evening, the Iron Vultures gathered at the outskirts of town. The air buzzed with tension as the sun sank into the desert, painting everything in blood-orange light. Tank leaned against his bike. So what's the plan, boss? Ryder's eyes were fixed on the horizon. We go to them before they come to us. Tedesco's got a base near the old quarry, east of the ridge. We hit it tonight. Slick whistled low. That's suicide. Maybe, Ryder said. But it's better than waiting to die in our sleep. Tank cracked his knuckles. I'm in. Been too long since I stretched my trigger finger. Slick grinned. Guess I'll come too. Somebody's gotta make sure you don't get all the credit. Ryder nodded. Then gear up. We ride at sundown. The desert wind rose, carrying dust and the promise of blood. The sound of engines filled the air as the bikes roared to life, echoing across the empty plains. Ryder slipped his old leather gloves on and whispered under his breath, almost like a prayer. For every ghost I couldn't save. The Iron Vultures rolled out as the sun disappeared behind them. Riders heading into the kind of darkness you don't come back from unchanged. The desert night came down hard and fast, swallowing the horizon in deep indigo. By the time Ryder and the Iron Vultures reached the old quarry, the air was sharp with the scent of oil and rust. The moon hung low, a pale coin behind drifting clouds. They stopped at the ridge overlooking the basin. Below, floodlights flickered across a cluster of shipping containers, trucks, and armed men. A generator hummed somewhere near the back, and shadows moved like insects under a harsh glow. Tank lowered his binoculars. You weren't kidding. Looks like an army down there. Ryder's jaw tightened. That's Tedesco's nest. Slick spat in the dust. So what's the plan? Walk in and ask for tea. Ryder gave a thin smile. Something like that. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small duffel, guns, flashbangs, a flare. The kind of tools men use when words are done. Tank grinned. Hell, it's been too long since we've done something stupid. Then let's make it count, Ryder said. They rode down quietly, engines low, cutting through the scrub until the dirt road widened into the yard. The lights hit their faces just as a guard shouted, Hey, who the hell are you? Ryder didn't slow down. He revved his engine once, a deafening roar that sent a ripple of chaos through the camp. Then came the first flashbang. Light exploded, shattering the dark like lightning. Men scrambled, shouting orders, but the vultures were already in motion. Slick's rifle barked once, clean and precise. A guard dropped. Tank smashed through a crate with his bike, scattering debris like shrapnel. Ryder moved like a shadow, methodical, controlled. Every motion was measured. Every breath carried years of pent-up rage. Inside one of the containers, he kicked open the door and froze. 3 young women sat huddled inside, bound and terrified. The smell of fear and gasoline filled the narrow space. "It's okay," he said quickly, cutting the ropes. "You're safe now. Go, head to the ridge and keep low." One of them whispered. "They said no one would come." Ryder met her eyes. They were wrong. Gunfire cracked outside. The night became chaos again. Ryder ducked behind a steel drum, bullets sparking off the walls. Tank's voice roared over the commotion. "Ryder! Right flank!" He leaned out, fired twice, then sprinted toward the main building. Inside it was dim and hot, the air thick with dust and diesel. He knew that smell. It took him back to the prison workshop, where he and Tedesco had first learned to survive the hard way. A voice came out of the shadows. Smooth, calm, and cold. "Ryder Cross. I heard you'd gone soft." He turned. Vincent Tedesco stepped from the dark. Dressed sharp even in a gunfight, black shirt, silver chain, eyes like polished stone. He looked older but meaner, every inch the king of his little empire. "You always did like grand entrances," Ryder said. Vincent smiled thinly. "You always liked getting in my way. Guess neither of us changed much." Tedesco circled slowly. "You cost me years, Ryder. Years. You think I'd forget that?" "I didn't frame you, Vincent. You framed me." Tedesco laughed. "Semantics. You were the perfect fall guy, quiet, noble, too stupid to rat. I admired that once." Ryder's finger tightened on the trigger. That admiration just ran out. The standoff held for a long electric second. Then Vincent lunged for cover. Bullets ripped through the air, punching holes in the sheet metal. Ryder ducked behind a forklift, returned fire, and felt the recoil shake up through his arm. Sparks exploded as rounds hit machinery. He moved fast, low, advancing through the chaos until he was close enough to see the sneer on Vincent's face. "Still trying to play hero?" Vincent shouted. "You think saving one girl makes you clean?" Ryder's voice was steady. "No. But it's a start." He fired again. The bullet caught Vincent in the shoulder, spinning him back against the wall. The man gasped, clutching the wound, but even bleeding, he smirked. "Go ahead. Finish it," he hissed. "That's what killers do." Ryder hesitated, gun trembling slightly. Then from behind him a voice called out, "Ryder!" It was Sheriff Dalton, standing at the doorway, gun drawn. Behind him, more sirens wailed in the distance. Ryder lowered his weapon slowly. Dalton moved forward, cuffing the wounded Tedesco without a word. Vincent laughed weakly. "Look at that, the sheriff and the outlaw side by side. What a picture for the evening news." Dalton didn't respond. He just dragged him outside toward the flashing lights. Ryder followed silently, the night air cool against the sweat on his skin. Around them, the quarry was crawling with deputies now. The Iron Vultures stood by their bikes, bruised but alive. Slick exhaled. "Guess that's that." Tank looked over at Ryder. "You okay, boss?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze followed the ambulance pulling away with the rescued women, then drifted toward the horizon. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'm okay." Dalton walked up beside him, wiping dust from his badge. "You just helped me take down the biggest trafficking ring in 3 counties. But I still don't know what to do with you." "Don't do anything," Ryder said quietly. "I didn't do it for you." Dalton studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I know." As dawn broke, the first light spilled across the quarry, touching the broken metal and the tired faces. The Iron Vultures mounted their bikes one by one, engines rumbling like a heartbeat. Before Ryder swung his leg over his Harley, Dalton called out, "Hey, Cross." Ryder looked back. "If you ever decide you're tired of running, I might just find a place for you in town." Ryder smiled faintly. "Not sure the law and I mix too well." Dalton shrugged. "Maybe the law could use a little hellfire once in a while." Ryder gave a slow nod, then twisted the throttle. The bikes thundered out of the quarry, trailing dust and morning light behind them. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was running from something. He was running toward it. As the desert stretched wide and golden before him, he reached into his jacket pocket and felt the folded crayon drawing Hannah had given him months ago. Motorcycles, sunlight, and a man kneeling beside a child. He smiled to himself. Guess we're even now, kid. The horizon swallowed them whole, engines roaring like thunder into the dawn. The morning air in Dry Creek was cool, almost forgiving after the heat and dust of the desert. The town, battered but resilient, was beginning to stir. People peered from behind curtains, curious and cautious, as the Iron Vultures rolled back into the streets, their engines humming low and steady. Ryder Cross led the pack, the sun catching the edges of his leather jacket, worn and scratched from battles fought, lives saved and nights survived. Every eye in town turned as the familiar rumble approached. Some looked with fear, others with admiration, and a few with a mixture of both. The Silver Spur Diner came into view, a small beacon of normalcy. Its neon flickered, casting a faint pink and blue glow across the street. Inside, Marlene had already opened early, sweeping the floor with a practiced hand but casting frequent glances toward the door. "Morning," she said as Ryder stepped inside, boots scuffing against the wooden floor. "Morning," he replied quietly. Tank and Slick followed, carrying minor scrapes, bruises, and a growing sense of quiet pride. They had survived, but each of them knew that the night's events had changed something fundamental. Marlene poured coffee for Ryder without asking. "You boys really shook up the desert last night." Ryder took the cup, his hand still warm despite the chill in the air. "Just doing what had to be done. And here I thought my morning would be quiet," Marlene muttered. He smiled faintly but didn't respond. His attention was elsewhere, on the small figure that had been waiting outside the diner since before sunrise. A little girl with braids and bright, curious eyes stood by the window, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. She looked out at him, hesitant at first, then stepped forward, the wind tugging at her dress. "Lydia." Ryder's chest tightened. The sheriff's daughter, the girl who had watched the world from behind locked doors and worried parents, was now standing before him. Her gaze met his, a mixture of awe, trust, and the faintest hint of recognition. He knelt slowly, lowering himself to her height. "Hey there," he said softly. Lydia's eyes widened. You're him. You're the man who..." Ryder gave a small nod. "Yeah, I'm the one who helped." She held out the stuffed rabbit. "I wanted to give you this. It's not much, but..." Her voice wavered, and she hugged the toy to his chest. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Thanks, kid. I'll keep it safe." For a moment, the diner and the dusty streets beyond it didn't exist. It was just the two of them, connected by courage, fear, and a strange unspoken understanding. Marlene watched silently from the counter, a small smile tugging at her lips. Tank and Slick leaned against the booths, pretending to look away, though their grins betrayed them. Ryder straightened and looked around. "Where's your dad?" Lydia glanced toward the sheriff's office across the street. He said I could meet you. Properly." Ryder felt something warm in his chest, a light he hadn't recognized in years. "Well, let's not keep him waiting then." They walked together toward the sheriff's office, each step a quiet affirmation of trust and courage. As they approached, the familiar figure of Sheriff Dalton appeared, eyes scanning the street until they landed on Ryder. He nodded once. "She's been wanting to meet you." Lydia stepped forward, shyly holding out her hand. Ryder knelt again, shaking it gently. "Pleasure to meet you, Lydia. You've got quite the spirit." She smiled, her small fingers brushing against his hand. "You saved my town. And you save people I care about. You're like a hero." Ryder hesitated, searching for words. Heroes were supposed to be larger than life, perfect, untouchable. He was none of those things. Yet, looking into her earnest eyes, he realized something crucial. Heroism wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up when it mattered. "Yes, I'm just someone who tries," he said softly. Dalton stepped closer, placing a hand on Lydia's shoulder. "He's more than that. And you should know, Cross isn't the kind of man who seeks praise. He acts because it's right." Ryder's gaze flicked to the sheriff, and for a moment, the tension of the past, the animosity, and the years of mistrust seemed to melt. Dalton didn't need to say it, but they both knew it. They were on the same side now. Lydia's small voice interrupted his thoughts. Do you really ride motorcycles everywhere?" Ryder chuckled. "Pretty much. It's faster than walking, and you see a lot more of the world that way." She giggled. "I want to learn someday." Ryder smiled, a little genuine warmth breaking through his usual guarded demeanor. Then I'll teach you. But you gotta promise to be careful. I promise, she said, eyes wide and sparkling. The three of them stood on the sunlit street, the wind tugging at hair and jackets alike. In the distance, the mountains cast long shadows, and the desert seemed calm for the first time in years. Ryder felt a subtle shift inside him, a sense of completion and beginning all at once. He had faced his past, confronted his enemies, and saved lives along the way. But this, the trust of a child, the gratitude of a parent, the sense that he might truly belong somewhere, this was what made it real. Tank clapped him on the shoulder. You're glowing, boss. And I don't mean the gunfire. Slick laughed. Yeah, even the sheriff's looking less like he wants to arrest you, and more like he wants to buy you a beer. Ryder shook his head, still watching Lydia skip toward the sheriff's office. Doesn't matter what they think. What matters is right now. Marlene came outside holding 2 mugs of coffee. You boys need a break. And maybe you deserve it for once. Ryder took the cup she offered and inhaled the rich aroma. For the first time in years he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Peace. Dalton joined them on the porch. You've done more than I could have imagined, Cross. And you did it on your own terms. Maybe this town finally has a place for you. Ryder's eyes met Dalton's, then turned to Lydia, her small hand still clutching her rabbit. He thought of all the lives he'd touched, all the risks he'd taken, and the hard road that had led him here. For the first time in a long time he allowed himself to hope. Maybe, he said quietly, there's a chance to start over. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the desert, the faint echo of engines in the distance, and the promise of a life built not just on survival, but on trust, courage, and a little bit of kindness. And for Ryder Cross, the outlaw with a past darker than the desert night, that was more than enough. By mid-morning, Dry Creek had begun to feel alive again. The town's residents emerged cautiously, sweeping the streets of dust and debris. The diner's shattered windows had been replaced with temporary panes, and Marlene moved inside and out like a hummingbird, offering smiles and coffee to anyone passing. The news of Ryder's actions had spread like wildfire. Truckers and locals stopped by the diner, shaking hands with the Iron Vultures and whispering words of gratitude. Children clung to parents, staring at the men whose vests bore symbols that once frightened everyone. But today those patches told a different story. Courage, loyalty, and protection. Ryder sat outside the diner on the wooden railing, Lydia perched beside him swinging her legs. In her hands was a new crayon drawing, brighter than the first, filled with motorcycles, desert skies, and a little figure of a girl holding hands with a man in a leather vest. This is for you, Lydia said, holding it out. Ryder took the drawing and studied it. You're getting better every time, he said softly. She beamed. I'm learning from the best. Ryder smiled faintly. He realized in that moment that this wasn't just a token of gratitude. It was a bridge. Between past and present. Between him and a life he hadn't dared imagine. Tank and Slick lounged nearby watching quietly, their pride clear but unspoken. You sure about keeping the kid around, boss? Tank asked, nodding toward Lydia. Ryder's eyes softened as he looked at her. Yeah, she's part of this now. Slick laughed. Part of our chaos, huh? Hope she's ready for that. She'll be fine, Ryder said. She's braver than most grown men I know. Just then, Sheriff Dalton stepped outside, tipping his hat. Lydia, you ready to come back in? She looked at Ryder, her eyes wide. I can't leave yet. Dalton's expression softened. I'll take her when she's ready. Ryder nodded. I'll be here. And hey, don't get used to seeing me around the diner every day. Dalton smirked. I don't think anyone here will complain if you do. The sheriff knelt slightly, placing a hand on Lydia's shoulder. She's safe now. All thanks to you. Ryder shrugged. It wasn't just me. We all did what had to be done. Dalton's gaze lingered on Ryder for a moment. There was a respect there that had grown over months of shared danger and quiet understanding. Still, you did good, Cross. More than good. Ryder looked at the town stretching out behind the sheriff's office. The streets slowly coming alive, laughter and conversation weaving into the hum of normal life. Maybe it's enough, he murmured. And for the first time it truly felt like it. Across the street, Marlene waved from the diner doorway. Coffee's on the house for the heroes, she called out. Ryder chuckled, glancing at Tank and Slick. Looks like we're not done being local celebrities. The three men rode their motorcycles around the block, engines rumbling in a slow ceremonial parade. Children clapped and waved. Adults nodded with quiet admiration. Even Sheriff Dalton followed on foot, giving a nod of approval as they passed. Lydia ran alongside, her little arms pumping as she laughed. Ryder slowed his bike, letting her catch up, and reached out a hand. She grasped it tightly, laughing, her earlier fears replaced with joy. For Ryder, the moment was transformative. This was not just about saving lives. It was about earning a place in a community, about proving that redemption wasn't impossible, even for a man with a past as dark as his. Later, the group gathered back at the diner. Coffee and pie were served, and the Iron Vultures sat quietly, letting the town express its gratitude. Ryder found himself watching Lydia play with a small group of children, showing them how to make toy motorcycles out of sticks and rocks. Carla approached him, now healed and confident, and handed him a fresh cup of coffee. You really did change things here, Ryder, she said softly. He shook his head. We all did. You, Lydia, even Dalton. Everyone played a part. Carla's eyes glimmered. Still, you showed up when it mattered. That's the part we'll never forget. Ryder took a sip, letting the warmth settle into him. He realized she was right. It wasn't about glory or vengeance. It was about presence, action, and choices made when no one was watching. The sun began to set over Dry Creek, casting long shadows over the desert and painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Ryder stood, feeling the weight of his past ease, replaced by a tentative sense of belonging. Tank nudged him. You really gonna ride off into the sunset, boss? Ryder smiled faintly. Maybe. But this time I know I'm not alone. Slick grinned. Finally, some heart in the outlaw. Dalton came up beside him. You've done more for this town than anyone I've ever known. Don't be a stranger, Cross. Ryder looked out at Lydia laughing with the other children, at the town coming back to life, at a future he hadn't dared imagine. I won't, he said quietly. As the night settled, the Iron Vultures fired up their bikes once more. They roared down the streets of Dry Creek, not as intruders or threats, but as guardians, men who had fought darkness and survived, and who had finally found a measure of peace. Ryder led them, glancing at the horizon. He thought of the lives saved, the battles fought, and the kindness he had finally allowed himself to witness in a world he had once believed was only cruel. Somewhere in the distance, Lydia waved. Ryder waved back. He knew that no matter where the road took him, this town, these people, and this little girl had changed him. The desert stretched ahead, vast and uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Ryder Cross rode forward without fear. Because redemption wasn't about erasing the past, it was about showing up, again and again when it mattered most. And in that moment, Ryder understood something fundamental. He had finally earned his second chance. The night sky stretched above Dry Creek, stars glittering like distant promises. And somewhere in the wind, the faint sound of motorcycles echoed. A reminder that even the hardest hearts could find purpose, connection, and a home. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell in order to get more amazing stories.